All right, now let's get into the Chimera tunnels under Bracknell, England, despite moving to Wales in the previous part. So we have to go. We have to go deeper.
Again, somewhat similar format to Gears of War. Maybe a
A bit.
coincidence?
Remember the structure that Cartwright and Hale found gives the idea that the Chimera tunneled throughout the entirety of England, much like with the rest of the world, with the tunnels converging ideally at one point. So we need to find out exactly what does that practically means,
Nah.
because again, the humans have still are missing all information about the Chimera.
Now, I suppose to give Resistance credit, the whole humans turning into the mooks thing, I guess they technically did before Gears.
It's a very common sci-fi trope. Invasion of the Body Snatcher is possibly the most famous story about it.
Yeah. It's weird how Gears took until like the third installment to have that, and even still, it was only by
All
main
right.
game 4 that we legit did get humans turning into locusts.
The hard fangs are similar to hybrids, but tougher and crueler. Their conversion process being skewed to higher, heighten their aggressiveness and imitate all self-preservation instinct. They rush deep into the fray to use the arc charger weapon where they can strike the most targets. Real Marine commandos often use designated marksmen to dispatch hard fangs before they can get close enough to be a threat.
So
Um,
basically, fearless
I still
abandon.
I guess, but I think the honestly, I think the Chimera with the auger are technically more dangerous. The arc weapon that the hard fangs possess can potentially be deadly, but they're relatively fragile enough that you can dispose of them like regular, hybrids. But instead, the guys with the auger tends to also be more resilient, and you cannot just hide from them. You have to actually get over with them, otherwise you're basically fucked.
So would you say it's a case of flavor text to make them more terrifying, make them appear more terrifying than they
Might
actually are?
might be as well. But again, keep in mind that this is flavor text in the same way that would be a Pokédex entry in Pokemon, only in a sense that it's completely inaccurate. But that it's supposed to be like a diegetic thing. It's the in-universe kind of information that the human resistance have discovered about the Chimeran species. So of course there might be a bit of speculation about it. Um, so I don't particularly blame it. It's kind of like of discovering things for yourself and everything. Anyway, what I'm testing here is the fact that the sacs that can birth the Reapers can potentially be detonated with a grenade beforehand. But honestly, possibly due to the weird hit detection, is not really a feasible option, at least to me, because it doesn't seem to be as effective as it probably would be. And grenades are a precious resource, so you don't want to waste them. You're basically just better just baiting them to hatch and then starts unloading the shotgun.
You can get in close enough. A shotgun tends to be your best friend in these sorts of games.
There you go. This is just a map of the potential conduits. Again, we will see more of that in the extras part. Let me tell you already this. I'm still contemplating, well, as we speak, because some time will have to pass anyway. If I'm gonna showcase the Etalog equivalent for the second game, because the one for this game, it's technically actually not that bad. It's a technical collection of again, diegetic stuff, a collection of stuff like letters, scientific discoveries, something similar to that, which is relatively concise in format. But the ones in Resident 2 can get a ridiculous level of wall text, and I'm just wondering if at some point it doesn't become too much. Like, to give an idea, well, just for the single entries, not to the big thing as a whole, but the in-universe encyclopedia in James Cameron's Avatar, the video game, is technically a bit more restrained in talking about the single elements compared to that.
Wow.
But again, you'll be able to see the effects or not. Otherwise, some of the important stuff I will just mention during that particular round. Again, all in due time because it requires context. See what I mean? Because there's one asshole with the auger, I constantly have to be on the move because, staying behind a cover is not an option anymore. The game purposefully baits you into this kind of position, and yes, sure, applying the old school mentality of Doom of constantly being on the move and never standing still, that's not a bad idea, but the environment also can potentially be a deterrent between the different elevation, the different stuff that gets in your way, and the fact that the enemy constantly absorbs your bullets, and doesn't seem to capitulate until, potentially when it's too late.
What fun.
And again, you have to worry about all those stuff. Like I said, this is not an FPS for people who want to have too much of a casual experience. Like I said, I guess it's also one of the pros of Doom coming back in 2016, for the fact that, despite the kind of gameplay that it had, it still had a dynamic set of difficulty. And even so, I argue that even in the norm, even at easier kind of difficulties, it still has a minimal level of challenge that is very welcomed, without necessarily having to be, brutal. Unless you're a game journalist, in which case you might get stuck in the issue room, not even working your fucking pistol. Why are you even paid to do your job? But no, and actually that's not too bad. Eternal actually has, even more of a balance to that. I have heard that the more recent Wolfenstein games actually have a level of difficulty that's relatively higher than normal, but I have yet to sink my teeth into those. So there is that. Also, fun fact about that, because who knows actually when we'll ever talk about more Doom 2016, but I don't know if you ever followed the development of that. I think Madman Muscle told about it, he had a video about it, but an internal miracle has to have happened at id Software, because the original trailers for Doom 2016 were not particularly promising. The game took a long time to make, and it was supposed to actually, be done relatively not too long after Doom 3, which was on the Xbox, era, the first Xbox era. That's a bit garbled, this transmission, but the original trailers made it look like they were taking clues from Call of Duty by having a desert setting, more the idea of a military shooter where the Doom Marine was collaborating with, I guess, a resistance group, in a more militaristic fashion. It just gave very, very bad vibes, but thankfully, somehow, maybe a time traveler came back to correct things, and we thankfully got actually a great game instead.
I wonder.
Again, I guess I'll have to check Madman Muscle video if I'm correct in that one. Anyway, small arena time. Basically, it's actually better than you may think, because you just need to stand in this circle and keep an eye out for when the platforms get raised. But otherwise, you have plenty of resources to make this work.
So this place is called Bracknell, is it?
I think so, yes.
Bracknell. I'm just looking it up now. It's known for having a forest called Bracknell Forest.
Wow.
It's historically known for its brick trade.
Okay.
It's. Honestly, that's about it.
So it's a place with a forest.
And used to have a lot of bricks where people shot bricks.
John
Yes.
Nike was born there. Not the Nike of the sport fame, but the Nike of land security.
Okay. Again, I don't mind the fact that this tries to have, a tour of the country, even in places that might not be super popular. So it's kind of neat. The following games actually will do something similar to that. Anyway, new variant of the Leapers, and these guys love to roll around and spit acid. So let's stop the spin dash of these fuckers.
A spray of red.
You may if you have a keen eye enough, you can recognize the fact that they are variant because they have, I guess, a more like a fur texture. So you can if you don't see them rolling, you can already guess they are a variant. But specifically, the rollers, which are adult leapers which have developed a faster trundling locomotion. As they near the end of their life cycle, internal decomposition results in venting of a corrosive spray. Rollers use this as an opening attack, blinding their prey before closing to strike with claws and teeth. When attacking in swarms, rollers have been known to wipe out sizable troop development in a matter of seconds. So they see them rolling and they hate them.
Yep.
Okay. Oh well.
And they definitely catch them right and dirty.
With much like with the regular leaper, shotgun is your best friend. Also, no, I don't know where the music went. Again, I get it that sometimes there's supposed to be a more quiet moment, like in this case, Hale sneaking out through the tunnel. Well, admittedly, this opening to this particular set of the Chimeran tubes is a neat kind of way of showcasing the level. The second game, I argue, the second game is a great way of presenting the level scenery, so look forward to that, technically. But you can tell that there is an attempt. See, if you don't know much about a classic FPS, back then, since games did not really had stuff like cutscene, at best you might get like a slide or a still image with text on it, or sometimes just plain text, you know? Sometimes it had to be the level speaking to you, in a sense of level progression. Maybe you started somewhere and then you build up towards, you know, a certain place. Usually, id Software games normally did not do that. They normally were most like mazes. Also, yes, now I have to do platforming. Normally they had to do mazes in Software games, which, again, it's not technically a problem. It's more of a say that one might potentially get, you know, a bit annoyed by the repetitiveness, but usually the gameplay loop manages to compensate for that. While instead, the games like Duke Nukem 3D actually allowed the levels to tell a story. For example, you start like in a district, then you move along the street, you blow up a building, or go to a strip club, you know, and, you know, it builds up to something. Notably because the engine games like the one that I mentioned use was literally called the build engine. Probably because of that reason. The people who made those games wanted to tell simple stories, you know, via level progression, which was kind of neat, even at the time. Although those tended to have also a distinction to have, you know, more use of voice acting. Believe it or not, Duke Nukem actually was not born to be a Doom clone. Originally, it was actually a side-scroller made by a company called Apogee. I will talk more about them technically when we get to Ratchet & Clank The Future Saga, because I think there is a point in me mentioning that. But very quickly, again, Apogee was a company which, technically speaking, is still present today, but more in a case that it has split from what it has become, a bit similar to Info Games becoming Atari. Essentially, Apogee eventually became what is known today as 3D Realms, but more recently, the person who founded Apogee took the reign of what was, you know, the original core Apogee, separated and got one or two IPs from them, Rise of the Triad and Blake Stone, I think. And more recently, I've been starting publishing rights to a bunch of indie FPSs that want to be, you know, similar to stuff like Doom, like Turbo Overkill, and that's pretty neat. Yes, again, this company called Apogee were the original creators of Duke Nukem, making him more of a side-scroller more than anything. Only later, with the 3D, it was actually, you know, became a proper FPS in the Doom style, and that's when they got John St. John to voice the character. Fun fact, because I checked interviews about that, John St. John actually has been very open in talking about what he did. In order to get the character type of voice to a T, he actually had to voice all of his lines through gritted teeth in what he basically said was giving a sort of an impression to Dirty Harry.
Interesting.
So the reason why Duke sounds like that is because it's John St. John, literally sounding like this. It was just also the compression that did it. Just for reference, John St. John is still actually voice acting to this day. I mentioned the game Turbo Overkill. He actually voices your AI companion in that, and also I think in a flashback, the father of a character. So actually, that's pretty neat.
He's also
I might
been...
actually get to show it at one point, since it's an FPS with a bit more of a story, and it's relatively fun to showcase. Go on, Jova.
He's also been big in Omega in the Sonic series.
Well, those are more past roles. I was actually, before knowing about all of this stuff, in recent times, I actually was pondering what John St. John was doing these days. So it's actually still neat that he's still employed in some kind of fashion. So that's nice. Okay, so I guess now we have a bit of ambiental music. Like I said, I don't think this score is really that bad. It's just forgettable.
Like, ambient music every now and then isn't terrible.
It's just
and
that
he
this
fainted
is...
again.
No, he actually jumped on an elevator.
Hale followed the Chimeran tunnels for several miles, finally reaching a major conduit junction. This would have led him directly into a Chimeran tower. The tower was most likely what we now know as C3. Each tower is named for its...
At least it's not C4.
C3 is only 12 miles from the center,
C3,
which would have been exceedingly well defended.
Which means more shooty. This is the only major section that has only 2 minor levels in it instead of 3.
Bracknell really that boring?
I don't know.
They could have made 2 levels out of it.
To be fair, I think it's also more of a case where Bracknell is where the tunnel starts and Hale progresses through, rather than staying in one location. While the other levels where him staying in one location. Okay, you start in this room surrounded by the grabbing Chimera, and it can get a bit annoying because you constantly have to look around and they constantly keep swarming you. Again, the tactic of this level is hide a bunch of enemies and then start slowly, showcasing them to you, making the illusion that they are never stop coming, giving you, again, it's supposed to convey the idea of the swarming of this type of, the Chimera, but then at some point it kind of becomes exhausting just to see, man, can we just stop? The next games will balance a bit more these aspects, so there is also that. There you go. If I recall correctly, after this you can take one of the elevators where they came here. All right, new weapon. The L209 Lark, light anti-armor rocket, was originally designed for use against Russian armored divisions. Since the Chimera invasion, it has been successful against the Stalker and other heavy vehicles. Once fired, Lark rockets are capable of user-guided maneuverability. Holding L1 will slow down the rocket, allowing it to be reoriented in flight. Aiming the reticule at any desired target will steer the rocket in the designed direction. The higher the pressure on the L1, the slower the rocket will go. Holding R1 after firing will release auto-guided submunitions. I have to admit, I probably suck at this particular thing, but I never bothered with the secondary fire or the mechanic of this, and just treated it like a straightforward rocket launcher because it probably works for the better against the vehicles. There you go. If you're wondering how much your physical attacks inflict damage on the enemies, for the regular hybrid, usually 2 physical attacks should be enough to kill them. I don't know if it's dependent on the actual difficulty of the game or not. Alright, if I remember correctly, I'm supposed to now take an elevator to get back up.
Also, like you mentioned, look at that, shades of blue instead of brown for once.
Again, it's more also gray in this, but in general, the game has this desaturated stuff which starts to be compensated with the bloom, Oops. There you go. Like I said, the next games actually will have a better idea in how to showcase proper color. Alright, This floor is also a beach. Like I said, we're technically towards entering towards the second. Well, we already are in the second half of the game, but we're basically entering towards the last third, okay, of the game. And the game is becoming more and more brutal, which means also even more swarming enemies, more people, come here with augers, knowing exactly what your position is and constantly sniping your ass.
Oh,
It
what
can
fun.
get very tiresome.
Yeah.
If you want to use regular attacks, physical attacks against the leapers, be my guest. But the detection might not work as intended, so try to just stick to the shotguns. There you go. The Chimera, actually, that's something that I haven't actually mentioned yet. The Chimeras do speak. You might have potentially heard, during this very run, because sometimes there have been some, voice clips. But honestly, I don't know if it's reversed language, if it's something that was voice acted and reversed, if it's just a complete fictional language or something else, because I could not really understand if it actually meant something or not. But it was actually, so I don't even know what kind of voice actors actually they employed. Maybe for the second game they used Dwight Schultz, I think, because I might have recognized, some of these impressions when it comes to some of the Chimera enemies, but I'm not entirely sure. I will need to properly check. Maybe they are credited on IMDb, but the problem is that a lot of information on this game, like I said, it's a bit hard to come by, and sometimes the sources are a bit conflicting.
So far, plot has been basically we're trying to run the monsters out of Britain by going all over the place.
Basically, yes. Again, the idea behind it originally was just to try to resist, but remember, the Chimera also invaded one of the British bunkers, and the angel that they had there for studying purposes, I suppose, got killed by Hale because there was nothing better to do. So basically, the resistance now best option is to discover what these towers are about and see if sabotaging them can actually hinder the Chimera invasion. Because the Chimera have the advantage, aside from the technology, the Chimera have the advantage of the numbers, of course. You mentioned that it's more similar to a zombie apocalypse, and you're partially correct, because it's the classic example of an enemy type that can thin your ranks by making more of their own as a result, meaning that it can be very deadly as a result. Like we mentioned, while the Locusts technically did something like this, at least in the first trilogy, about torturing the humans, they were not actively trying to fill their ranks by using their victims. So it was more of a case where they were just explosive at reproducing, and as a result have a lot of numbers. But instead in this, it's treated properly like an actual hive mind, kind of like a zombie state, but not completely of a zombie type. Again, it tries to be a mix of something, say, the undead and late invasion. By the time of the third game, there will be a sort of an explanation what the deal with the Chimera is, but don't count too much on it.
I noticed you said sorta, like they leave
again,
it up in the air
your mileage may vary. Like I said, if I told you everything now, it would be without too much of a context, and it wouldn't benefit that much. All right, the reason I jump cut is better. I was just checking if there were more provisions, but activating this button, surprise, stalker. So get your rocket launcher ready to just shut him up.
Dun dun. I love the sullen music that happens.
Yeah, the stinger. It's like tries to be a jump scare. Yeah, the turret of the hailstorm is actually pretty neat. It's instead of just being a standard turret which fires, it's a cluster of needles. It's pretty cute.
Okay, why does it fade out like that? It looks like he's falling unconscious every time.
He told me he was in London, and he asked if snow was normal for July.
Babes,
He described a
Yeah.
tower in the middle of
is
London.
snow in July normal for London?
Found in Somerset,
Oh.
and with power conduits emerging in all directions. He said,
Well,
"If we destroy the tower,
that
we destroy the Chimera."
Kay's father asked the exact same
For all I
question,
knew,
Sword in the
Hale was
Stone,
completely mad.
and his
What he
answer
was
exactly.
saying was true.
So what?
He had no idea
There was
how to
one point
destroy
in
the tower,
July where
but there
where
was
snow was
one
actually
factor
melting.
working in our favor.
Melt.
They had been
It
able
felt
to
like
contact
melting when I
the
was watching it.
and they had joined forces with us in Cardiff. I
There you
decided
go,
to
more
believe that
American
Hale was
reinforcements.
right.
And Hale
We
actually
asked the Americans
believes
to help
that
build
destroying the
first
tower in
second
London
tower.
is the key to
We
winning
were
the
bringing
fight.
everything we had to London. I was counting on Hale to clear out a landing zone. If he couldn't take out the stalkers, the mission would be over.
No
before it
pressure.
began.
And that's what we're gonna do in the next part. With the next part, we enter endgame territory and start the military, movement towards London to see if we can actually destroy the tower there and save humanity from Chimera in the UK. So see you for that.
See ya.
See ya.
Right.